And so now all of our flow errors are resolved. So now we have kind of a inconsistency with our app. We have search, which is reading from preload, and we have app that's reading from preload. It would be better, since app is the parent of search, that if we could just pass that data from the app into search, so we don't have kind of two places reading from the same data. We'd rather have this one parent component reading that search data and then passing that into both search and into details. In this particular case, when you're just loading a JSON file, it's probably not a big deal. However, like imagine this was coming back from the API. You don't want to request it in two places, right? You want to have it be requested once and then passed into two different spaces. So that's the reason why I'm going to show you this particular part. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to change search into a component like this as well. And this is going to be props. And we're just going to pass shows in here as well. And we're just going to pass all of preload.shows, as well as the props. Now notice we don't have to type these props because we're not actually really reading from them, right? We're just taking an object and passing stuff in. And with Flow, you don't have to go back and say, this is what these types are. The type inference is going to be enough here. You can if you want to, but there's no good reason to. So now we have to go back to search and make it read from data or not read from preload anymore. So what we're going to do is we're going to remove preload from this. And rather than doing preload.shows, we're going to, instead of doing that, we're going to say this.props.shows, right? Yeah. Okay. Now we have prop types errors, right? Because we have to type our props. Okay, so let's go up to the top here. And underneath state, we're going to add props. So you might be noticing that state here is different than props here. That's because this is in particular for typing, and this one here is actually like a real variable that exists on search, right? Okay, so what we're going to do here is we're going to have shows, which is going to be an array, right? Because it's going to be an array of shows. And what we're going to do here is it's going to be an array of stuff, right? If it was an array of strings, it would look like that. So basically, this is a parameter that you can pass into array to say, like, this is going to be an array of strings or an array of mixed, right? It can be an array of stuff. It can be an array of any. Like, I don't care what's in here. It can be an array of anything. Any is a cheating way, by the way. Any just says, like, don't prop check this at all, right? Which is not actually what you want to do, right? So if at all possible, don't ever use any. You want to use other things, right? If you are tempted to use any, it's probably better to use mixed, right? Because mixed is saying, like, this could be anything, but it's going to then try and continue doing type inference. If you say this is an any, it's like all bets are off, I don't care about this anymore, right? So be careful about that.
If you choose mixed and then end up only putting in strings, is it going to yell at you?
It's not going to yell at you. I mean, it's not a good idea, right? But it's not going to yell at you. However, what is a blessing / a curse with mixed? So let's say I was down here and I tried to reference like something in like this.shows or this.props.shows 0, right? It's going to say, like, I don't know anything about this. So the next thing you're going to have to do with this is say if type of this.props.shows, you're going to have to what's called do a type refinement, right? You're going to have to validate to the type checker as like, hey, I went through this process and now I'm positive this is a string. So then I can do these. Then I can call methods that are on strings, right? And if you try and do that beforehand, it's going to say, I don't know what this is. Whereas if it's any, it's going to say, I don't care, do whatever you want, right? So any is a crutch. So don't use any if at all possible. Another thing is like if you're doing like imports on something that's not type checked, so like if I create another file that's not prop checked and I import it, it's going to import it as an any type, and it just makes it easier to work with, right? So files that are not opted into type checking are exported as any types. Okay, so that was kind of a side note on that. So we're going to give it a particular shape of object to look for. So it's going to be a title, which is a string. It's going to be a description, which is a string. It's going to be year, which is a string. It's going to be an IMDb ID, which is a string. It's going to be a trailer, which is a string. And it's going to be a poster, which is a string. I think I got all of them. Okay. So now I know I have this array of this particular type of thing, right? And I can be guaranteed that I can read anything off of it. Now, we have this particular object here. One, this is kind of ugly the way it exists right now, right? And the other thing is that we're going to be using these shows all over our site, right? So it'd be really nice if we could just like declare this as its own type, right? So we can say type show equals all of this business. And we can pass that in right here so we have an array of show, right? Now we can even take this one step further. This is going to restrict this show to this particular file. We want to be able to use shows all over our project, right? Because we're going to be reading out of it details as well. So you could do something like export a type from this file or something like that, but we're going to take this like one step further. And we're going to save this, and we're going to go to our types file and just put it in here. And I think the way that we're going to want to do this is just say export type show. And now this is going to be available throughout our throughout our entire website. So because it exists here, we can go back over here to search.jsx. And we don't have to import it since it's in our flow type directory. That's automatically just going to be filtered into our page, I believe. So if we come in here and say yarn flow, I think we should still be gold. Nope, it doesn't like show. Oh yeah, it's going to yell at us for all of our tests. Yep, that's true. We did that. So, I mean, this is a good thing though, right? Because now we're telling that, hey, we have this prop type shows, right? And it's going to say, hey, you're rendering this over here and you're not giving it shows, right? Flow is kind of like saying like, you broke all of your tests. Do you know that you just broke all of your tests? Now, what you can do is you can make this what's called a maybe type. We're kind of getting off into the weeds too, but I like showing you how to do this. If I put a question mark here, maybe I'll have some shows, right? So this is now a lint error, but that's what this question mark means, is like this is now an optional thing. Now what the Airbnb default rules are, the Airbnb ESLint rules, it says that you have to have a default prop type if you don't have, or if this is optional. So what you would have to then do is say default props equals shows, and just make it an empty array. Airbnb is super particular in what order they want things in. Anyway, that's how that should work, is you should be able to give it a default property type and it should be okay with a maybe type. We're going to require shows every single time, so it's not particularly important. Oh, yeah, because, yeah, that's fine. So in any case, we don't need default props right now. So this is not important because this is not a maybe type. So now we're good to go. We have this array of shows. So now we're very safe to refer to, like, for example, here where I say show.title and show.description. All that stuff is guaranteed to be there because I've typed that to be a show type, right? And that's now available to us throughout our entire application. So we have this.props.shows. That's all good to go. Let's go back to, let's see, make sure everything works still. So we're going to go back to 8080, browse all. Everything is still working, which is good. And now all of this is coming from app.jsx is being fed into search that way. Any questions about that so far? So let's go ahead and cut a branch for anyone that fell behind there. Again, if you run flow typing right now, all of your tests are gonna fail. If you want to, you can come into your spec and just pass them in. Shows equals preload.shows. And right there. And that's all we had to do to fix our tests. So yarn flow. Oh, we're missing some prop type validations. We will get there momentarily.